Did you hear what she did yesterday?
No, what?
Oh, she did all kinds of things, and so did her boyfriend. I could not believe it.
Oh, I can. You know what they did last weekend?
I did hear about that. It gets around real fast.
I know. They should really be more careful.
I know. They're just like broadcasting it to everybody.
This is At the Root of Knowledge, and in this episode, we're going to be talking about the rumor mill.
Hello and welcome to At the Root of Knowledge. On this show, we discuss timeless topics. Through conversations, we try and identify underlying principles and assumptions beneath many of mankind's ideas and beliefs. All this so we can find the truth and share what we learn with you. Please keep in mind we're not experts, and just like you, we're here to learn. Today we have a very, very special guest speaker and someone that we are looking to get feedback from on the topic of gossip. She's my sister. She is our head of advertising. And we're welcoming Bethany Scheck onto the show. How are you doing, Bethany?
Hello, Daniel. Hello, Phil. I'm doing very well, thanks. Thanks for inviting me.
You're welcome. Thanks for coming on to the show.
So, gossip, slander,
Defamation.
defamation.
How would you guys define it?
Definition, going straight into it. Well, I'll let Phil take the lead on this one.
Okay. Just a personal definition or like a legitimate definition?
I think both things are kind of necessary because it's going to take a personal flavor.
Okay. Well, I don't have a definition from like Webster's dictionary or anything, but a personal definition I would say would be talking about someone or something behind someone's back, or maybe also, I mean, I guess you could gossip about someone in front of them, so. But I would say talking about someone or attempting to throw mud on someone's good name by way of falsehoods.
Yeah, I mean, when I think of gossip, I think of something negative, and I think of something that's being said about someone when they have no opportunity to defend themselves. You say good about someone behind their backs, you give them praise. I don't think that's gossip. When I think of gossip, I think of something negative, and I think of situations where people aren't able to defend themselves. And it can be true or not true. You know, it can be a negative truth about someone, or it could be a negative lie about someone, but that's what I see gossip as.
Well, I did look up the actual definition for it, because it's something that's also defined kind of in the Bible too. So Webster was just basically saying that it's casual or unconstrained conversation or reports about other people, typically with details that are not confirmed to be true. It's generally, I guess, untrue things or things that can hurt someone's reputation. And then I think in the Bible it's more just sharing anything that shouldn't be. But my next question with that is something you said, where people don't have a chance to defend themselves. I don't know where you guys want to go with this, but one of the questions I had was, is defining where it's gossip and where it's not. Because sometimes you're saying things that aren't nice about people, but there might be a reason for it. You know, say you're warning someone. So do you have thoughts or anything on that?
I do. If it's relevant, to the health of the person you're speaking to, or the person who you're speaking to responsibility for other people, then it's not gossip. What would be an example? You got kids. Okay, this is just a very general example. You've got children, and your children hang out with other children, and you happen to know that some of the kids that have become very popular are doing something not good. Maybe they're going and they're robbing stores, or maybe they're smoking weed after school, whatever. I wouldn't think it would be gossip to tell other people's parents, hey, don't let you, that's not where you should start, right? Well, actually, you should start with their parents, but, not to spread, misinformation or anything damaging about other kids, but like, hey, warning people, because it's relevant to actually help them, it's actually helpful, or whether you know about a sexual abuser or something of that nature, then that's not gossip. But when you say something to someone that's not, it's not helping them at all, and there's no danger to that person from the information you would be, quote, withholding about someone else, if that makes sense, then that's gossip. That's kind of how I see it. What do you think, Phil?
Could you repeat the question? Sorry.
I was just asking, like, what defines between where gossip starts when you're talking about things? Because sometimes if you define it as saying things that may hurt a person's reputation or may not be nice about them, there is a point where I think it's necessary to say things that aren't nice about people, but it's not always gossip.
I think that comes down to whether it's your place to say something about it, though. In the example that Daniel gave, if you know that your child is going out with someone else's child and misbehaving, then, okay, you have the responsibility to go and tell the parent about it. But in the same way, like, if you know that your brother is going out with someone and misbehaving, is it your responsibility to inform your parents?
See, that is kind of where it gets tricky. That's one of the questions.
Exactly. Because, you can make the case that, yeah, you should tell your parents about it because someone is misbehaving and maybe even doing something wrong. But at the same time, I don't know that it's your place to do that. You're not responsible for that person. So I think it comes down to whether it's your responsibility for that person or not. Whether you should say something about it or not. And especially if it's just like, if it's one of your friends, I would say you can try to give them some advice on, hey, maybe you shouldn't go and shoplift. But at the same time, I don't know that it's your responsibility to go and tell their parents that they're shoplifting.
Well, I think another thing we could consider is, like, is this going to be helpful? Is me telling this person this thing about someone else going to help that person in any way? Is it going to help anyone? If you're just, if you're sharing it with the intent to make someone better, then it's, I would say, probably easier to excuse as not being gossip. I don't know if that helps or what you guys think about that.
I think that the number one way that people find themselves in the position of gossiping, like, sometimes you're gossiping without realizing it, and I think the number one way of that happening is people thinking that they do have to take responsibility for everyone around them, and so they share all of the details. They're involved. I think there's a few other reasons, but I do think that it's my responsibility to tell you or to tell everyone else about you so that they know. And then I do think that becomes a slippery slope, like drawing the lines about who you have to be responsible for or where your moral obligations.
I'd agree with that partially. Like I said, I believe there's a time and a place to inform someone about that. Like, if you're in a group setting and someone was to ask about what you did last Friday night with somebody at a party, and that person isn't present, like, I don't know whether it's your place to say that in front of an entire group of people, especially if what they might have done would have been embarrassing towards them. Like, maybe there is a point where, like, you need to talk to the person about it before you can actually, say something to the group about it. And that's where I think, like, it's just not your place to say, especially if it's someone's personal life. I hear that a lot, people gossiping about personal lives. And at that point, I would say it's not your place to tell anyone about. Like, if someone's trusting you with information about their personal life, then, and you're going and telling everybody about it, or just telling a group of people about it, or even just one person about it, and you were entrusted not to, then that says something about your integrity right there.
I actually heard, I was looking up some information about, like, how not to be a gossiper and stuff, and, like, other opinions on the matter, and that was, like, exactly one of the points. The first point was what you were saying, like, if other people are involved, whatever. They said, step one, if you're about to tell a story, are you actually one of the lead players in the story? Is it your story to tell? Which you said, and I was like, and then the second one was, if it's something that was told to you in confidence, as soon as you tell one person, as soon as you go to somebody and say, they told me not to tell, but I trust you, you are destroying your reputation with the person that told you not to tell and the person that you're telling it to, because you're proving to both of them they are not trustworthy. And I was like, that's so true, because almost everybody wants that one person. This is my confidant, and then they have a confidant. Again.
Not only that, I mean, you could be damaging the relationship with the other person, but you're damaging your own integrity. You're literally shooting a hole in your integrity when you do that. It's hurting you, maybe even more than the person whose information you're sharing.
Yeah, well, I agree with that. It's just that you're literally, instead of just destroying it, you're broadcasting it to that person. Here's me destroying my integrity. Watch. And then you continue with your story. So I think if anybody is trying to make sure they're not going to be a gossiper, if you hear that and you come out of you, maybe pause and think about what's coming next. Stop yourself.
Yeah, I mean, another thing is, a lot of times, you might not realize that the things you're saying would offend someone. And I don't know if that's gossip if they're there, but I can think of situations in my life, especially in the past, where someone was talking and they clearly couldn't tell that it was, something wrong, but it really hurt my feelings hearing them say that to everybody about me. It's like, hey, why are you telling everybody this stuff? Nobody else needs to know that. Like, that's another thing. I mean, I don't know if that counts as gossip.
I'm not sure either. I've been on the opposite end of a story exactly like that. Just somebody didn't like a particular food, and I thought it was hilarious, and I told everyone because I thought it was a funny thing that wasn't important, and it happened to be very offensive. So, yeah, that is something. Like, I think that goes into, like, having charity. Like, if you don't think about it in the aspect of charity, you just think it's funny, and you don't consider we're all going to make mistakes. But if I had been more charitable, I would not have done the exact same thing.
I mean, I'm sure in plenty of situations, like, there's no way of knowing that someone wouldn't take that in a lighthearted way. It's like, oh, they're going to get upset, for sharing that. Maybe they would have nobody would have thought anything of it except for the person it's being told about. Maybe nobody thinks anything of it except for that one person, because it's an insecurity they have. But if you don't realize that someone's insecure about it, you have no way of, knowing that you should restrain yourself in that unless they tell you.
I would disagree. I think you can infer if somebody's going to be insecure about something.
Sometimes it's obvious, but there have definitely been cases it's like I've felt insecure about things, just being honest. I wouldn't expect anyone else to know. I'm sure it hurts when people say stuff, but it's like, would they have known if I didn't tell them? Like, how would they have known that that would have been offensive to me, for them to share that with people?
Some of us, speaking from experience, are very bad at social cues and do not pick up on these things. But there are definitely times even the, densest of us can figure that out, but depending on how light the topic is in my world, it may not be a light topic in yours.
Well, that's true enough. But at the same time, I would still say, like, I guess I'm coming from this perspective where you're still telling someone something in confidence. See, I feel like if it's... What's the situation there? If you're telling, like, a story in a group setting, is this something that happened with the both of you? Or it's not, I'm taking it that it's not something that was told to you in confidence.
For me, it wasn't something that was said in confidence, but it was still something that made the other person uncomfortable for it to be broadcasted. I guess I figured it out. I discovered something.
Right. I mean, even in that situation, though, you can ask the person, like, would it be okay? Would it be okay if I share this with the group?
I don't know. I know plenty of people that, this is the interesting thing we're talking about people behind their back. I know plenty of people that never talk about people except for saying positive things. That's the only thing they'll ever say about someone behind their back. I've ever heard. I know a few people like that. And taking that into consideration, it's like if we all adopted that attitude, we wouldn't even be needing this conversation.
I don't think that's plausible, especially in like a business setting. What if you are a manager and you're called into your boss's office and you're expected to give reports on every single one of your employees who you're responsible for, and you're not expected to just say positive things about them, especially if they're not a good worker. You have to bring up the negative things. And I don't see that as gossip necessarily.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, you don't necessarily have to put a negative light on it. You can just be like, I don't think they're proficient in this area. You don't have to go into like negative details about it. You can just say,
what if you're asked to?
Why do you not like the way this person What if you're asked to? I mean, it doesn't have to be negative, though. Necessarily.
But if you're saying someone is not proficient at something, that means that they're not good at it, which would have a negative connotation.
Not necessarily. I wouldn't call myself a good boxer, but it's not like it's negative to say, like, that guy does not know how to box. Okay. That's not negative. That's just the truth.
Okay. But that's... I don't think that's the same as being in a work application. Like, okay, so you don't know how to box, but that's not what you do for a job. Say I work as a mechanic and I don't know how to take a tire off. What should my supervisor say to his boss about that?
We probably shouldn't be having this guy take tires off because I'm not sure that he quite knows how to do it. It's not negative. You don't have to go, this guy's stupid, or this guy's a horrible mechanic, you know what I mean? You can just be like, hey, it doesn't have to be negative.
Let's get him retrained.
Yeah. Or maybe this job isn't right for him. It doesn't have to be negative, though.
That'd be the nicest firing ever. This job just isn't right for you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, but that still comes off as condescending.
No.
I think tone and context has a lot to play into that. Because two different people can say exactly the same thing to you, and tone and context will.
Oh yeah, I've been told.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, I've been told plenty of times that I'm not good at things without feeling like they were saying something negative about me.
Think of it like criticism versus constructive criticism. Like, some people can definitely criticize you, but it's not constructive. Well, it's kind of this. It goes into like gossip versus actual necessary information. It's criticism versus constructive criticism, and gossiping. Which
Yes,
is
but necessary information, I would say, does sometimes have to be negative.
Yes, it can be negative. That's kind of what I was getting to. Is like
So you do have to. So you
You
can
can
say something negative about someone
without it being
without it being gossip.
Is it necessarily negative? That
Uh,
person
I-
can't play guitar or whatever. Is that negative? Like,
Well, I think negative becomes relative at that point.
yeah, it's like this guy has a low IQ. Does that necessarily have to come across as, let's just say, okay, not, let's just say somebody is mentally slow, you know. You don't have to go, that person is an absolute idiot and they're retarded. You can just be like, you know, I don't think they have the IQ for this position. You know, and you don't have to say it in a negative way. Is it negative to have a low IQ? Not necessarily. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that. But it would be negative to say this person's stupid. Do you kind of get where I'm coming from?
I think that's just putting it in a harsher light.
I
mean,
in
the-
management skills, they go over that.
Sorry?
When you go through management classes and stuff, they talk about how to put things in a less harsh light, but they call it like positive spin. Like what he's saying. It is negative, but it's relative.
Yeah, I guess what do you mean by what's negative mean to you, you know? Yeah, I think of negative and I think of like something that's bringing people down or something that is condescending. But I think you can be honest without being condescending.
Well, I
Doesn't
agree.
mean
I
people
agree.
Take it that way.
I agree you can be condescending without being negative, but sometimes it is necessary to be negative.
I think we just have a difference of viewpoint on what negative means. Like negative is like subtracting. It's like taking away. It's diminishing.
But if it's factual, it
The
doesn't really
opposite of
diminish it.
uplifting someone.
Like there's addition and subtraction, and you know, negative you're subtracting. Positive you're adding.
Okay. So back to that application then of the reporting to your superior about someone who you're responsible for. Is there a way then that you could put a negative and a positive, like constructive criticism that still contains something negative? It's not solely negative, but it does contain something negative.
I guess. I think I understand your point, and I think we're bickering over minor details of perspective. I mean, no, I don't think that's how it is, but yes, I think I understand where you're coming from. And I think I understand the essence of what you're trying to say. You know, okay, you're not pointing at something good. You're pointing at something that's substandard. Okay, and you're going to call that negative. So, sure.
I think that the difference between the negativity that you guys are talking about is some negativity, some bad things are like necessary negativities that can be changed, and some negativities are things that are unnecessary. Having a bad attitude is a negative thing, but it's something that can be adjusted, whereas you can have a negative, like that's one kind of negativity. It's something that is always just not good. You should not be angry and treat people badly. That's a negativity that's not really changeable, versus having an negative trait or having something that's factually wrong that needs to be changed is a different kind of negativity. You could say maybe necessary and unnecessary, or regular negativity and unnecessary negativity. I definitely fall into different fields. Like, unnecessary negativity is bad attitude and being mean about it and just criticism. Whereas regular negativity, positive negativity.
Yeah, I guess it's like I can think like you can be critical of something without being negative. You know? That's kind of just where I come. Like, you don't have to be negative towards the person or about the person, you know? You don't have to talk negatively. This is just how I see it. With that and you can still be critical of it, you know?
Yeah.
Like grading a test, like, hey, you got an F. Like when your teacher's grading you, like, okay, they're giving you an F. They're giving you a report of failure, but they don't have to be negative about it. They can just be critical. Like, here, you failed the test.
Talk to me after class with a smiley face.
Yeah, or something. I don't know. That's just I don't think you have to be negative, ever, towards people. But I think, again, that's a difference in a detail, you know, on, you know.
Yeah, I'm willing to agree to disagree on that one.
I had a couple of other questions that I prepared for.
Okay.
But I didn't know if you guys had topics that you wanted to discuss or questions that you had already read.
I did not. I would be excited to hear what you have to say, though.
Okay, yeah. Didn't want to, talk over you. But one of the next questions was, I said, what is gossip and how to, decide whether or not you're gossiping, which is something we've talked about. One of the things was, why it's so easy to gossip. Why do we all find ourselves gossiping? So I think identifying some of those things also helps people to identify, when you're doing the self-reflection, I don't gossip, I have no reason to gossip. And then if you think, oh, I probably do have reason to gossip.
I feel like it goes without saying, gossip is, if you're gossiping about something, it's something interesting.
Not necessarily, I don't think. I mean, I think everybody does take it to be interesting, but apparently, I forget the exact terminology of it, but we are all built with an exaggeration of our own abilities in our heads. So it was described to me as one little angel sitting on your shoulder being like, you are super awesome, you can do this, and then a little demon being like, everybody else kind of sucks compared to you. And it's kind of a natural thing. Everybody, I think people that have it more have the superiority complex, and then people that don't have it enough have the self-esteem issue. So I think it's actually natural to gossip, which is why one of the reasons why I suggested the topic.
I think that attention has a lot to do with it. You know, Phil said interest. Yeah, if you can provoke interest in someone, from someone, that makes you more important, and you get validation from people wanting to hear what you have to say.
See,
I think that's a piece of it. Not all of it, but
that was one of the things that I had notated as it. I think a lot of people not only get validation from it, but it also kind of works to when you're talking about people like that. And especially, I think the majority of gossip happens in the workspace for most people. So especially in that kind of a setting, you want to look better. And so many people have so much of an issue with themselves, so much insecurity about who they are, that they find themselves even just slightly I did all this, and they just seem to kind of do just that. So pick me for the promotion, pick me for the raise.
People try and subtly lift themselves up by pushing other. They'll subtly do anything to show themselves in a better light, even if that's by contrast. I think that's kind of become a little bit of a norm.
I think it has too, which is another reason why I was so worried about defining where gossiping starts, because there is also in the workplace, there's this, if you're working with a bunch of people and your name's going to go on it and somebody else's name is going to go on it and the job wasn't well done, you have to just tell the supervisor, or if it's your story, is it gossiping if you told somebody else, because you're going to have people coming in after you. So that's, I think it does come down to what you said for that, like, if it's helpful or not helpful, hurtful or not hurtful. I just didn't know if you guys had any other.
Yeah, I mean, if you got like a coworker, right, and they're making it very difficult for you to do your job, or you're put in a big project, and this coworker is just making you carry all the weight, or this coworker is just like making your job miserable, keeping you or your company, whatever, from providing the quality product or service that you should, then I don't see anything wrong with being like, hey, look at boss, I'm not liking working with this person. And you don't have to go straight into the details, but, if your boss is going to do anything about it, he'll go like, oh, okay, why? And then you don't have to go and smash the other person's name, but that gives you the opportunity to be like, well, this, and this.
Yeah, I could see that. Do you have any thoughts on that, Phil?
I'm still tossing it around in my head a little bit. I still think there is an element of interest that has to be involved. Like, if you're trying to gossip to someone and they have no interest in it, it's gonna go in one ear and right out the other.
Yeah, but you still, I think you still gossiped. It just wasn't received. Wasn't spread.
I think you can
Well, is there gossip if it's just one person saying it?
I think so. I think that kind of bridges into, judgment, quote unquote, whereas in you're trying to determine the value of someone else, or really the value of someone else. Judging, people say don't judge. Okay, like, I say judge insofar as it's your responsibility to make judgments, but insofar as, passing judgment on someone else, that's where it's wrong. And I think that kind of bridges into that. But yeah, I think it is, I guess, kind of in the same field as gossip. You're making judgments about, unnecessary judgments about someone else.
And you're offering those judgments. I think gossip is like a spreadable thing. You spread gossip. You invite other people to share in your bad opinion of someone. And that person doesn't have to take that opinion. They don't have to listen, which is actually one of the points later, like how to avoid gossip or how to get rid of it. But just because somebody didn't listen to you, you still tried to gossip. You still
tried to
take this jar of gossip, but then just leave it there. It is a spreadable. My opinion.
So you still tried to put dirt on someone's name, so it's considered gossip.
Actually, they have a whole
Out of curiosity, who is they?
They being, I did not write down the name of it, but there's one of the
A website, a book.
Not a website, an actual philosopher that was doing the philosophy of like the human mind and why people gossip.
Mm-hmm.
And he's the one that created what's called like the drama triangle, and he defined the terminology for exactly how gossiping works and why it works and why it's so common. And he started off the person that's usually telling the story, the first person. So it basically in a workplace scenario, right? You're there and you're like upset at this person over here because to you they appear lazy, they're not doing their job, and you're pulling all the weight. So you call to your friend, your confidant, and you tell them, have you seen her today? She's doing nothing and I'm doing all the work, whatever, and you're just being mean and nasty, and then they get to go, oh yeah, I know, they did that to me last week, whatever, and that's it starts. But they term it as the first person is termed the victim, because in a gossiper's eyes, usually the person telling a story is the victim or has felt victimized before. And then the second person is called the rescuer, because they're the person that you always call in to take the gossip, to save you from being this victim. And then in that triangle, the person that they're talking about is the prosecutor, because we all have, with that little negative voice, kind of a malicious view naturally of the outside world. But I think that fluctuates per person and how you were raised and everything, but I think it's natural to believe that other people are out to get us, and that's why gossip spreads so quickly, which is why it's so important to be aware of it.
Well, I think another thing with gossip is like it makes you feel, I mean, kind of going along with what you said, it makes you feel good about yourself. Like, hey, I'm above that. Hey, I wouldn't go do that, you know?
Yes.
Self-validation. And it doesn't have to be like you're the victim, you know? It can just be like, okay, I'm the hero because I'm not that bad, or, you know. Self-validation, really.
Yeah, I think that's a very common thing. I think that's like what we naturally do, like I was saying, where people kind of puff themselves up. While I was listening to a couple of videos about how other people deal with gossip, I heard apparently about 94% of drivers will say that they're above average on their driving. Which means 94% of people would think that they were above the 50% par.
Here's a question. How many of the best drivers think that they're not that great?
Honestly, I think if you have an honest view of yourself, you don't believe you're great.
I read somewhere, and this was years ago, about a study. You know, the most intelligent people, if you ask them how smart they are, they won't put themselves above average. They'll put themselves at or below average intelligence.
Well, that has philosophical roots to it as well. Like,
Right. Which is why I'm stupid. I'm retarded, okay? I am below average. No.
But it does have philosophical roots to it. I cannot remember the name off the top of my head, but there was a dream interpreter in ancient Greece who was asked who the smartest man in Greece was, and her reply was Socrates, because he's the only person who knows that he doesn't know anything.
Yeah, and isn't that just profound? Like, that was kind of the idea of, like, I'm driving around. I think I'm an okay driver. Just because when you hear somebody.
Well, when you hear that, your instant reaction is, oh, well, I should say I'm not a good driver. That way I appear to be more intelligent.
And then you're kind of in that. And I think, you guys already did one talk about pride, but I think that the root of all evil is pride. And I think that that's what causes us to think we are great. And other people, we know so much more than everyone.
Yeah, we really just need to go around telling people we're stupid and we're bad drivers and we're evil human beings. And then all of a sudden, everybody thinks you're the greatest. No, you become the greatest.
I think you have to kind of believe.
I'm just kidding.
Yourself.
Yeah, no, you actually have to have a firm grasp of reality and your own weakness for that to actually mean anything. You know, it has to be a genuine understanding, not just saying that to be self-deprecating it, but saying it because you actually believe it's true and, you know, accurate to reality. Just a thought.
I mean, I think there's some valid points in that thought, although I also know people who, like, will purposefully put themselves down just because they want you to, yes.
Validate them, yeah. I know there's a term for that, but I can't remember what it was.
See, maybe even I am guilty of that same thing. Probably am. But when I tell that from people, or when I can tell that people are trying to get that from me, I always do this thing where I just sit there and I'm like, yeah, okay, keep bringing it, keep telling me. And I will intentionally try not to give that to them. And I'll just sit there, and then eventually they'll stop, or they'll keep going. But, yeah, because I'm sure I do that myself. I don't know. You guys have been around me enough that you would know.
Well, I don't want to start gossiping about all of your character flaws.
I don't have any, so it's okay. Go right ahead. It doesn't matter.
But that would make them untruths, so now we're really gossiping.
Fair enough.
I'm just going over my notes here. I wrote down a bunch of different quotes and things that talked about the biblical quotes, and in my imitation of Christ that talked about gossiping in different ways and what it does like to a person. And then one of the things was like Solomon spoke about it. He didn't directly speak about gossip, but he spoke about it as in I mean, I can read you the quote, but I got from it. It's from Proverbs 10:18 and 10:19. He was talking about how you can't talk your way out of sin. You keep talking, more or less, you're going to make it worse. But he said that the wise man basically speaks less. And in my imitation of Christ, it goes over that too. Just in chapter 3, find peace in yourself, and then you'll be able to give peace out. And I think that also plays into why gossip is so common. It's important to identify it, because if you don't have that inner peace, you're not going to give out inner peace. If you're in turmoil, you're likely going to find turmoil and talk about turmoil and focus on turmoil and spread that.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Just in general, like, I know there's you mentioned a lot of the stuff from the Bible, but there's a lot of people who I would consider pretty intelligent people who have done who have written books and stuff on that. The one that comes to mind for me is Jordan Peterson, how he talks about setting your house in order before you criticize the world. And he pretty much says exactly what you just summed up there, that like if your house is not in order, you're just pointing out the stuff that like you hate about yourself. You're just pointing it out in other people.
Yeah, I think when thinking the question to yourself, do I gossip? When am I gossiping? Or at what point am I gossiping? If you next think, why would I gossip? I think that becomes a very blaring statement to yourself. You have to look inwards, and it's a great point for like self-reflection. Like, why would I gossip? Why would I do this? And you'll quickly be faced with a lot of issues in your life. If you're gossiping at work, maybe you're just actually not doing a well enough job, or maybe you need to have better communication with your supervisors or your coworkers,
or maybe
you need a different job.
Right, or maybe you fail to take responsibility for stuff, and
it's guilt a lot of the time. So, and then in your personal life, you gossip about people. Gossip about absolutely anything. But if you find out, if
I hear a lot
of
gossip about like people in relationships. And I agree with that. Like, more often than not, it's someone who's
jealous
or envious.
Yeah.
I have a question. So not to totally distract, I think this is actually very close to along the same lines as you are. Let's say you're in a situation, you're married to somebody, and there's an issue in the relationship, and you don't know how to handle it. Would it be all right for you to take your issues between the two of you and go and talk to their parents about it, or your parents about it, to try and understand how to best handle these unrectified issues?
I always hesitate to say yes when you're involving your parents or your spouse's parents in your relationship, because more often than not, the tendency is they're like, oh, I'm going to treat it as if it's something that happened in my relationship. And that can work some of the time, but every relationship is different. So I would hesitate to go to someone, your or your spouse's parents, about a problem in your relationship. Together, at least. I mean, if you want to ask your parents by yourself, hey, I'm having this problem. Emphasis on I'm having this problem. Like, I'm having this problem, understanding why my spouse is so upset about something. Right. I think if you're accusing the other person, one, that's a sign that you have a problem yourself, But 2, that's a sign. If you're accusing the other person, that you need, I would say, seek professional help at that point.
Actually, in my experience, when I took my marriage prep class, Father Jenkins said that it is best to actually ask the other person's spouse. If I have an issue with my husband, it is best for me to ask his parents for help or to bring my complaint to them. But his reasoning was that nobody else in the world is going to continue to love and not change their opinion like the other person's parents. So if he came to my parents with an issue about me, they're not going to suddenly change their opinion of me. There's no chance really of gossiping because it's not going to hurt how they see me. They're going to love me and think of me the same way. So he can go to them without that fear and get help. Plus they know me better than anyone else. Now I think that there's
If you're saying that the person's with them though, as opposed to the I'm sorry, you're saying that the problem's with the other person, not with you.
Yeah, so if I had an issue in my relationship and if it was me and I had an issue, I could maybe go to my parents, and I could also go to anybody. But if I had a problem in the relationship, like not just with myself, like I'm like, wow, I'm so crabby lately, can somebody give me advice on how not to be crabby? That's one thing. But if it's like, we're having this issue, so you're having it with the other person, even if it's a you thing, you're having it with the other person, going to their parents if you have to talk to somebody, if you need outside advice, is usually what Father said should be your first step. If you can't work it out between yourselves nicely, go to them.
So you're trying to work it out between yourselves first, then, is what you're saying.
I think that's always the first step for anything, is try to work it out between yourselves. But that's also my opinion.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with trying to work it out between yourselves, but like, it is interesting that you would say go to the other person's parents first, though. Because while it may not change their opinion of their child, it may change their opinion of you.
I think that any parent that received somebody else, if Mary went to my mom, for our family relationships, whatever, if she went to her, my mother's opinion of us is not going to change, and she would see that this person coming in wanted to help, wanted to fix the relationships with her children, wanted to better either herself or better her children, or however she wants to help. And that nothing shows that like calmly coming to somebody with love in their hearts about somebody that they have love for.
I agree with that in that situation, but that's a very specific situation.
That is a very specific. It's just, but I think even for me, like I have talked to my father-in-law about stuff. Him and I got pretty close over just discussing, even casually, but that casual conversation, being able to talk about my marriage, being able to talk about whatever I wanted to that dealt with, the family, and it's only strengthened our bond, and I think that brought him closer to me as a family member, somebody from the outside. We're now kind of both on the inside together.
You're
my father.
Right.
Yeah.
But you haven't gone to your father-in-law and your mother-in-law with your spouse.
I think we did we have a kind of unique thing. We mostly talk to his dad, but I think we've talked to him a couple of times, not too many together. Usually it's me, but I'm usually the one that's talking. I'm usually the one that I'm a conversator, and I need to talk. He doesn't need it as much, so he doesn't usually go wherever I'm talking. Does that make sense? It's a personal thing with him. He talks less than most people.
I have a question. So somebody's really frustrating you, okay? They're driving you absolutely nuts, and you cannot get this off your mind. They've been bothering the heck out of you all day. It'd be all right for you to, kind of share that frustration with your spouse. Oh my gosh, I got to work, and would that be okay? Would that be gossip?
Okay, so if you're just asking me if it's gossip or not, that's one thing. But if it's okay, I think I would say, first of all, I would go to the person that's irritating you. Like, the number one thing, and everything that I read about stopping gossip is, whenever you're irritated, go to the person that's irritating you and start at the source. That's how you avoid, like, your own gossiping. It's stopping yourself, going to the source of the irritation. But as far as talking to your spouse, personally, I think you're considered to be one, and you're supposed to be able to share everything with each other. So I don't think it would be gossiping, because that's like your God-given person to vent to. You know, that is the other half of you. But in the same sense, it's not. Although it's not gossiping to tell them, I would still use caution in, like, not coming home and sharing all the negative stuff of your day if you can help it, because
Or use
not only-
discretion when, like,
I think
using someone's specific name. Just be like,
I think
it wasn't Jerry from work. It was just one of my coworkers.
Yeah, I think, because that's, like, almost exactly it. As you'll cause two different issues. One is you will be basically designating a time to just kind of, like, dump uncomfortable things on your spouse. People don't enjoy that. It is necessary, so if you can help not doing it, then you try not to. But if you need to, then that's also okay, because that is your place. And the other thing is, using the names and talking specifically about workplaces and stuff. Spouses can get very, and in my experience, I don't know about everybody's, but, it can be very, it's difficult to watch somebody you love suffering. So if you come home and all you do is complain, if you don't talk about the good things too, like, just saying, you're just having bad days all the time, that's going to will affect their opinion of somebody else. Although I don't think it's really gossiping, because you do need that person, you do get that person to talk to. That is your designated person to talk to. But it will affect their opinion of somebody else if you use specific names, stuff like that. So you still should use caution, but I don't become something slightly.
Right. I mean, if it's a true opinion, feeling you have, that was my thought. Like, it's your spouse. You should be able to share your genuine opinion or thoughts with your spouse, regardless of what it's about. I mean that.
Well, yeah. There's a difference between venting and gossiping, I think, because I mean they can be the same thing, but in general too, like, people do have to vent. You do have to discuss things. You do have to get the difficult things off your chest, even if they're about other people. But again, you're involved in the story, and it's your story to share if it becomes that. So, still, like, step one of, are you gossiping? If it's your story, maybe you're not. But if you're venting and it's your story, you're probably not. In my opinion.
Yeah.
I think in that situation, it's still a little bit hard to tell whether it's gossip or not. Like, if you're venting and it's your story, but it involves other people making bad decisions, is that gossip?
Like, that's the thing. As long as you're not lying, like, I'm pretty sure you can share with it's not wrong to share something with your spouse. Like, there's nothing that you should keep from your spouse, as long as you're not lying.
Okay, but what if you're single then? Do you just not vent to anybody?
I don't know, but I'm just saying, in the situation of a spouse, like, you're one with your spouse, so you should be able to. If you're single, should you not vent to anybody? Maybe you should, I guess.
I think everybody needs someone to vent to. I just think that it's like, I don't know the best way to term it, but like an added step of protection when you're married. Like, like, okay, maybe, but like, okay, he's my husband or my wife or whatever. They're my spouse, so I'm like that much more sure that I'm not gossiping. But I think gossiping is more. Is it your story? Is it true? Is it necessary or hurtful? And if it's those things, if it's your story and you feel like it's necessary to tell it, whether it's for venting or to like inform somebody of something that they need to know. And if it's true, then it's most likely not gossip. Because I think most terms of gossiping deal with things that are either not confirmed truths or not true, or if they are confirmed, it's not your story and it's unnecessary. But would you agree with that, or do you think there's more to it or less to it?
I would say there's at least that much to it. There might be other stuff that like adds into those, but those are, I would say, like your main points.
Now, because I listened to a TED Talk about gossip.
Okay.
Specifically, right? And they separated gossip of our close lives and gossiping like about like gossip column, like about celebrities and stuff. Do you separate the two different kinds of gossip? Because there's the gossip where we share the stuff that's going to hurt the people we know versus ingesting things about people that we don't know. Like, honestly, getting any information out of a magazine is about somebody we don't know. Would you say there's a difference between those two things?
Maybe slight differences. I don't know that there's a difference in principle, though. You're still taking in information. Like, if it's gossip, whether it's about someone famous or your next door neighbor, it's still gossip.
I mean, I do agree with that in the like basis terminology.
And in that situation, like, why do you want to know about the celebrity? It's not like you're gonna gossip about them and then be like,
see,
I'm better than that celebrity. Maybe
Yeah.
you will, actually. I don't know.
Yeah,
But at the same time, it's interesting.
It is. I found it very interesting because the lady that was giving the talk, she is actually a gossip column writer. And she was discussing how that kind of gossip, in her opinion, and her argument was that it's necessary for our little economies, basically. She brought up that the Egyptian hieroglyphs, like in the servant quarters, had like written gossip about what the queen was doing, or just the interesting things that went on around the castle, but it was like notated in the servants' quarters. And she was talking about how the gossip that is released, the quote-unquote gossip that is released about celebrities, and the way that it is presented to society over time shows it's kind of like a social experiment in ways, because the way that people respond to it and what's put first is going to show about like community values, morals, how the feminist, like if it's more or less feminist, or not like whose role is what, and what kind of things are people willing to take in.
What does society care about?
Exactly. What does the society care about? That's exactly the And in that way, she made a convincing argument for me to separate it, but I wasn't sure if I was like, okay, I'm okay with gossip columns. But she also made the argument that the celebrities, basically, as a celebrity, kind of sell yourself.
You do put yourself out there, like.
Exactly.
But at the same
But that
time,
doesn't necessarily make it okay, does it?
no, I wouldn't say it makes it okay to gossip about a celebrity, whether they put themselves out there or not. Because you can make the same argument that, like, your friend put themselves out there, but does that mean you should gossip about them?
I see what you're saying. I think the difference between the two statements, not that I'm arguing for the gossip columns, I just found this very fascinating in the way that she put it forward.
No, it's fine. You can
Like,
play
but
devil's advocate with it. That's fine.
But I found what she was saying was that the people that are being gossiped about in celebrity columns are actually gaining free publicity. And in that kind of way, they're
Okay,
gaining from it.
but is
your
that
friend
is that
isn't.
based on the presumption then that any publicity is good publicity?
I think that was a vague presumption that was probably made there.
I'd argue that any publicity is not necessarily good publicity.
I would agree with that, but I think that was the argument she was making. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of like people that trying to grab attention. You know, kind of historically, media network. The entire idea of media network is, you know, any publicity is good attention. Is good publicity. You know, attention is good, even if it's negative. As long as you can grab people's eyes, they're gonna get interested. And as far as somebody that's trying to spread information, and get people to read or listen to, then yeah, it doesn't matter if it's good or bad. I mean, think if you're a newspaper,
Yeah,
you don't really care, you know.
Well, that was gonna
Of
be
course,
my-
you're gonna say any publicity is good publicity. If it's grabbing people's attention, then that's good for you, right?
If you're a newspaper, yeah.
Well, yeah, if you're a newspaper, though. We were specifically talking about celebrities and individuals, so.
Right. I mean, and I could see like spreading something negative about a celebrity, like, okay, that could damage their name. But if you're a nobody and then all of a sudden people are noticing you and you're all over the news, then maybe from your standpoint that might be something good, even if they're talking about something that's negative or
Put your
risque.
names out there.
Yeah.
I think that's the same thing as putting down one of your friends so everybody listens to you. That celebrity may not be your friend, but you're still just putting them down. You're exposing something that shouldn't necessarily be exposed, or at least isn't your information to expose about a celebrity. And it's the same thing if you're doing it to your best friend. It's like you're exposing something about them that wasn't yours to expose and letting the world know about it. Whether that's because it's interesting information or whether that's because you're wanting to lift yourself up.
Here's a question. So somebody's running for a high position, political office, very high, and you happen to know that they killed 3 children or something like that. It doesn't have to be that extreme. Maybe they're cheating on their wife. Who knows? It could be a lot of things. Is it gossip? Well, I guess that goes back to what we were saying before, whether or not it's constructive or your responsibility to share. So maybe that answers my own question.
Yeah, I think it would be your responsibility to share it if you knew.
Yeah.
But then you
If
bringing
that's
up
your
the-
job to do that.
Well, is it your job as a citizen to, yeah, would it be your job to do that?
As a citizen, you have proof of it.
Yeah, sure. You got undeniable you got a video or a picture, or maybe you even have it in writing, you know.
I think if it's going to be if it's your government, if it's your place where you live, we are
Right, because that person is going to make decisions for everyone. That person's going to be making decisions for you.
And is going to, it's going to affect you as well.
So yeah, I think it's your place to do that. Even if you have plausible cause to believe it, you should take it up with, not necessarily the media. Don't take it to the media per se, but take it to somebody, take it to the court, take it to someone that can.
Yeah, I would
Fact
say
check.
if you have plausible cause, I would say you have to fact check it first before you can take it to somewhere for it to be published for everyone to see. Like if you otherwise I feel like that's misleading at best, and at worst it's just trying to slander someone's good name.
Well, I have 2 questions that popped up that go on either side of this.
Okay.
So just going back a little bit so I don't get too far from it before it's irrelevant. But we were talking about the celebrities, right? Writing in like gossip columns and stuff like this, or like we said, we have an invested interest in kind of learning about them. It's interesting because we see them everywhere and they put themselves out there. Do you think it's plausible? Not saying that I do, but I'm asking your opinion. Do you think it's plausible to justify some of that based on we want to know our role models? Like your kids are watching these TV shows and stuff. And I think that, it ties into a slightly separate topic of like, is an artist, is artist work like directly derived from an artist. If you don't like a particular artist, can you not appreciate any of their work? That's a bad person, you know. But it's kind of the same thing. Like, it's a role model. It's somebody that's out there that your kids are seeing and everybody else is seeing. So, is there a point where you should actually know more about them? And like gossip columns are. It kind of goes back and forth. Where like, where is it? But what would you think about that? Like, you got role models out there, and then we have people feeding us information about these people we don't know. Do you think that could slightly justify a gossip column, or do you think that something else should be done to inform us? Or do you think we don't need to be informed as long as the final message is good? You know, like, where does that fall?
Okay. I feel like that was a lot of questions bunched up into
It was
one.
kind of a lot of questions. It was a big thought. It was a really big thought. But
So,
I mean, you've got
as far as
scandal and
right,
everything.
right. I mean,
But would it be? It wouldn't be so scandalous, I guess, if it wasn't broadcast.
no, it wouldn't. And in that scenario, you can also make the difference between, like, okay, you're saying there's an artist and then there's the artist's personal life. If he's an artist, that means that his professional life is, for instance, a painter. That's what he does as a profession, is paint. So I don't necessarily think that because he has some scandal in his personal life, you can't appreciate someone's paintings. But at the same time, does that mean that you should make them your ideal? No, not necessarily.
See, like, it ties into what the TED Talk lady was talking about, I think, because here we are walking around, right? You like this art, and you're like, wow, this guy's amazing, all this stuff is great. And then if you knew anything about him, you know, like, he's a mass murderer, and he got away with it, he did this and that, and that's the person you've been idolizing. And her argument was kind of like,
No,
we
that's
bring
not
about
the
that.
person you've been idolizing. You don't idolize the murderer. You idolize the painter.
Fair enough.
They are
you can
one
separate
they're
there.
one in the same person, but you're not idolizing them for the murder they committed. You're idolizing them for the paintings that they've been able to paint.
You're talking about, is it okay to try and know the characters that you aspire to be like? Like,
Yeah,
I
people
think
who-
so. I mean, you look up to George Washington, people will read his books, they'll read his biographies, you know, they'll want to understand the struggles he went through and the decisions he made and the decisions he had to make and, you know, how he coped with different things. I think that's normal. As long as you're not sharing negative stuff unnecessarily about people, I think that's good, you know?
It's a necessary fact.
Like to find a role model, and you know there are plenty of role models out there that'll be like people that I would consider to be good role models. That'll be the first people to tell you, look, hey, I messed up, I did all this stuff wrong, or I was, you know, in a horrible place in my life, and you know this is how I recovered. There are a lot of stories that are just like that, and I think those make a lot of the best role models, because then there's context and there's dynamics. Like, oh, they had a conflict and they got over it. Just my opinion, though.
See, I think I haven't made up my mind about how I feel about this TED Talk that I listened to yet, but one of the other thought-provoking things was she was showing that those kinds of things, the public view of these private affairs or whatever, it showed how the public responded to it. But it also kind of helped if you have a history book and a tabloid from that same time period next to each other, I think that you'll be able to, like, validate it, because a lot of people, like, history is written by people afterwards, and people change history books and things like that. But the tabloids are going to give you an accurate view of, like, yes, this is really how it was, or yes, this. So I think historically, like, it becomes, as a historical gossip column, you know, it becomes something important. But if we stop writing them now, will that change in the future, will that change our history? So, like, that was another interesting thought. I thought maybe, I mean, the end doesn't always justify the means. Just because it might help historians in the future doesn't necessarily mean that we should still keep doing it. But it was another topic that I was like, maybe it is separate, because it does serve some kind of a purpose.
Well, by purpose, you mean some kind of a positive purpose? because like lying serves a purpose.
Yeah. I mean, yes, a positive purpose. It you have two different versions. History is remembered by different people. Like
Right.
everybody other the British are going to remember the US history differently than the US is going to remember it, because we saw it from different sides and we were told different versions of it.
Right.
We all know that, there was a war, whatever, colonized. Like this happened, but how it happened and why it happened. Yeah. And it leads to a lot of stuff that we've seen where people are like coming out about stuff that happened in history, and like you've been idolizing people that weren't historically great and stuff like that, which is why I said learning about your idols now. But that kind of leads me into my next question, because the second question.
Just a quick note before you go into that. I think when you say idolizing people, like, I think you still, like, you idolize certain parts of them. Like, I don't.
You got people that you admire. You don't have to idolize. I don't know that you should really idolize any person per se, but that doesn't mean you can't admire people.
I mean, I guess idolize, by breaking it down definition to make an idol of somebody, is the only person you should idolize is Christ, or the saints maybe in that context. But you're right. Yeah, I mean more
Right.
a role model, something that you admire about them. And usually when you
Right. I mean, you can say, like, okay, this athlete is a role model for my daughter or my son. The role model that they're choosing of that person is their professional career, as I said before. Like, once you start getting into, like, their personal life, well, I would argue that people's personal lives are going to change, whether, like, if I have a athlete who I admire and I say I want to be a successful athlete like them, I'm going to strive towards being a successful athlete like them. Say they went to jail before they were a successful athlete. Does that mean that I'm going to say, all right, I have to go to jail before I can become a successful athlete?
No, but that doesn't mean you can't admire them for coming out of the depths and, going from jail to be this great athlete. You can learn from their stories and from the negative things they've done. You don't just have to look at the highlights and, the positive things. A lot of times the negative things show not only contrast, but show improvement and show, the dynamics of the character and kind of how this person became the person they are,
like
today.
St. Augustine was
St. Paul.
St. Paul?
Well, St. Augustine would be a much better example than St. Paul because, yeah, totally different lifestyles.
Yeah.
All right, but still, while that can add to, like, a story, that person would be putting that out there for someone to publish.
Yeah.
In the case of, like, an autobiography. Whereas if it's like a gossip column, I feel like it's not always put forth with the permission of the person who the gossip's about,
or even with good intent.
Right.
Which was one of my questions, which, do you think it would be, so, like, you're not supposed to gossip about your friends, it's sinful to gossip. Is it sinful to be, like, a gossip column writer? Do you think? Is that something that
I think there's better things to write about than gossip?
But a lot of times if you get a job at a newspaper, you're a journalist, they just assign you. If you're assigned a gossip column to be a journalist, what would you think about that?
I would say that you might want to look for a new job.
I'd agree, but I mean,
like, if you're a doctor and you work in a hospital and they say you have to euthanize somebody, you have to Right. Like, you have to go and perform these abortions. Like, are you going to do that just because it's your job?
Yeah, and
It's like that goes back. Look at the 20th century. Like, it's your job to be a guard at this prison camp. Are you just going to do it because it's your job? That's what most people would do. And say, well, I was told to do it. It's not my fault.
yeah, you definitely do take fault, but
Right. Like, it's your responsibility to choose whether you want to do it or not, or whether you're going to do it or not. So, like, in that scenario, I'd say no. Like, refuse to do it. Show your boss that you have a backbone.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that, but again, that was one of the thoughts when I said, are they separate, celebrity gossip and personal gossip kind of thing? Like,
I think in
if they
essence, no, they are the same thing. They're both still gossip. Whether you're gossiping about a person who you know or someone who's on TV, it's still gossip. And especially if you're spreading rumors about a celebrity or you're spreading rumors about somebody you know, it still has that same effect.
And I think I do actually agree with that. Because the more I'm thinking about it too, I'm thinking about trends towards, oh, this person has a bad personal life. We're gonna not even allow them to produce anything anymore. We're not gonna allow them to publish. We're gonna boycott. We're gonna do things like that. And so in that way, gossiping can ruin entire careers. I mean, it can ruin your personal career for your friends if you're gossiping about them, but you can also ruin careers for people you've never even met before by continuing to consume or produce gossip about these people that you have not met.
I would say yes, for the most part.
So I guess
Like,
in essence that, yes, I would agree that they are the same. Like I said before, I wanted to play devil's advocate, but I would agree that they are the same, and I think
it was good that you did play devil's advocate, though. It
I
led to a
do
bit more
enjoy-
clarity on the subject.
I enjoy.
No. You should never ask questions that oppose your viewpoint ever. Okay, that's how you get
It
into
leaves
trouble.
holes. Yeah.
You get confused. Let's keep it simple. All right. I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, that's necessary, and that's something I think we should do.
I mean, I think we'd have a lot more fruitful media and a lot better time of things if there wasn't things such as like the gossiping. The gossip columns become unnecessary. It also kind of shows.
And maybe, sorry. Go ahead. Finish your thought, please.
If you need gossiping for entertainment, it shows a lack of interest in your own life, and you probably need a new hobby. Not in any kind of offensive way, but if you don't have anything interesting else to talk about, you should probably find something.
Yeah, I think the cure to gossip is to play the devil's advocate, or to try and speak from another person's perspective. And, that's one of the cures is talk about gossip columns or whatever. What if we were all like, let's examine how difficult things are for someone else, or, try and play the devil's advocate for the view that you take. That would make things interesting. And that would lead, I think, to interesting news and conversation and useful communication that's not gossip.
Yeah, compassion and perspective. If you have those two things, you're probably less likely to gossip, because not only would you not have anything hurtful to say because you're looking at it from different perspectives, and different perspectives with compassion. So.
Right, and also taking into consideration, like, is what I'm for like a gossip column, it's like, is what I'm putting forward productive? Like, is this adding value to anything?
Our society or people's lives or, our party or group or community or whatever.
Yeah, does anybody stand to benefit from that?
I think we have talked about a lot, and I think that gives pretty good coverage to the things we were wanting to talk about in this episode. I mean, how do you guys feel?
I think we covered it pretty well. I mean, there's obviously stuff that we missed, but at the same time, like, we covered, how to define it, and we really got into some of, like, the nitty-gritty on, like, when do you call it gossip as opposed to, like, necessary critique.
Right, like a lot of the technicals about it.
Right. Yeah, I'd say we did a pretty good job. What about you, Bethany? What do you think? Did we answer your questions well?
Yeah, I think it covered most all of my notes anyway. It's not that I had that many notes. It's just a list of questions. But yeah, we discussed what it was and how to define it, and I think a little bit how to deal with it. But
Thank you for coming on the show, by the way, and bringing your experience, your knowledge, your research to the table. We figured that you'd be a good pick for this. I know it was your topic. But I think you did have a lot of useful things to say, as I knew you would. So thank you for that.
oh, no problem. Thank you for having me on. I enjoyed working with you guys.
You're very welcome. Thank you for coming on. It was exciting having you on as our second guest speaker.
And for those that don't know, if you've seen any of our posts on Facebook or Instagram, that's Bethany. Bethany's spearheading that. She's in charge of that, and I think she's done a fantastic job, and we appreciate her hard work.
I think so. Thank you. Can't thank you enough, but keep up the good work.
Yep. So do we want to do a summary and wrap up, or?
I think we pretty well summed it up there.
Yeah. Well, thank you all for listening to us. Feel free to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or YouTube. At the Root of Knowledge is the name, or you can reach us by email at therootofknowledge@gmail.com if you have any questions, concerns, or comments. That's all. Goodbye.